Australian billionaire Tim Gurner said, "We need to see pain in the economy. We need to remind people that they work for the employer, not the other way around." In this episode, SNAP Plutocracy, let's talk about how the fight for SNAP and the ACA isn't about budgets or bureaucracy, but about control, power, and who's allowed to eat. We're not out of money, we are out of mercy. Let's get it. Hey, welcome back to another episode of American Angst. I'm Ryan, the creator of this podcast. Thank you for joining me once again. I am trying to figure out this algorithm thing with YouTube, so help me out if you can. Leave a comment, leave a like, share this with a friend or family. And if you're not subscribed, please subscribe. I'd love to have you following along on this journey. Today, we're going to talk about SNAP, and we're also going to talk about what is ever increasingly obvious, at least to me, that the United States is being ruled by a plutocracy. Not a democracy, a plutocracy. And we're going to dig into that a little bit. But you've probably heard the news about the SNAP funding being paused. Now, for those of you who don't know, and I don't know who that would be, but SNAP is it's Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program. It's a program that feeds roughly 42 million Americans every single month, which is about 1 in 8 Americans. So that's significant. Most of which are children, or most of whom are children, seniors, or working families earning too little to cover groceries in an economy where wages haven't kept up with rent, healthcare, or inflation. One person, Grayson from New York City, went on record to say this about SNAP. Without SNAP, we would have to choose to pay for housing or food. You always have to pick housing because you can survive hunger better than exposure. Now, think about that for a moment. Someone who is a SNAP recipient, this is what they have to reason in their mind, especially as the government toys with or pauses SNAP benefits to those who are in need. Now, why do we have this situation? Well, we have this Republican government shutdown. And I'm saying that intentionally. It is a Republican government shutdown. The Republicans are in the House, the Senate. The Republicans have the presidency. They're in control. They have the ball is in their hands, as some would say. And they have the ability to negotiate, but they are refusing to negotiate with Democrats. And why are they refusing to negotiate with Democrats? Because Democrats do not want to pass the continuing resolution because it's not clean. Well, let me say it like this. They don't want to pass this resolution this funding bill, because they want to talk about the ACA. Here in the near future, the ACA tax credits are going to expire. And so what's the issue? Well, the Democrats want to put in a stop measure so that the tax credits don't expire, because expiring tax credits means that health insurance is going to skyrocket for most Americans. And the Democrats are saying we don't want that to happen before we fund this budget. Let's negotiate on how we make sure we protect the health care for millions upon millions of Americans. And the Republicans, who are so proud of their big, beautiful bill, are refusing to even negotiate that issue. They want to fund the government, and then let's maybe talk about that later. And as we know, they're not really keeping their word these days. So they've shut down the government effectively. They have not been doing business for, over a month now. And in this shutdown, the issue is that now, because the government shuts down, the Trump administration has says, well, we're not going to fund the SNAP benefits. Now, they can fund the SNAP benefits. There is a contingency fund. It's about $5 billion available to continue these benefits while they work out this CR and funding the government, right? But the Trump administration is refusing to use those funds. Now, just the other day, a couple of courts basically ruled that they have to use those funds, that the Trump administration must use those funds. And the Trump administration is fighting that in court, fighting to like whether they actually do or do not have to use those funds to fund SNAP benefits. So, what we can see here is that the Trump administration is leveraging hunger to strip healthcare. Let me say it one more time. The Trump administration is leveraging hunger to strip healthcare. Folks, I want to be clear. We are not out of money. We are not out of money. We are out of mercy. This administration, cruelty is the point, and they are using hunger to leverage the Democrats, to leverage the American people in order to strip healthcare benefits from tens of millions of Americans so that they can provide massive tax cuts to the wealthiest of the wealthy. Let that sink in. Now, let's talk about it. Plutocracy. So I titled this whole thing SNAP Plutocracy because I'm trying to play a little bit on words if you didn't get that already. I do that sometimes. SNAP Plutocracy. Let's talk about plutocracy and the Trump administration. The term plutocracy, if you don't know, means rule by the wealthy or the powerful few dominating policy. That sounds pretty familiar. Trump era governance, their style aligns with many of the hallmarks of what a plutocracy is. How so? Policy shaped for the elite. Public benefit is squeezed. This is what we're talking about when we're talking about SNAP benefits in the ACA, right? Policy shaped for the elite, the big beautiful bill. Public benefits squeezed, pausing the SNAP benefits, expiring out the tax credits on the ACA, and regulatory oversight is weakened. And we've seen this over and over again. This is why we're shutting down all of these different programs, why we're shutting down all of these different bodies of government that help monitor, that help oversee monies that are spent, how the government interacts with corporations, how corporations interact with their employees, so on and so forth. You get the point. And when we look at the Trump administration, you've got to see this, that the Trump administration has made many key federal appointments that are people of very high personal wealth. One estimate identified that there's about 26 appointees in the Trump administration that are worth more than $100 million. And get this one, at least 12 appointees in the Trump administration are billionaires. Now, my personal opinion is billionaires should not exist. You have to exploit a lot of people in order to become a billionaire. Billionaires should not exist. Billionaires should be taxed into oblivion. Do I mean that the people should cease to exist? No, I just mean that the people should not be billionaires, that they do not need that kind of a wealth amassed for themselves. And imagine a world without billionaires where people are taken care of. So this administration, this plutocratic Trump administration with all of these billionaires and 100+ millionaires, they are so far disconnected from the average American, from you and me. And they've tricked a lot of us, not me, but a lot of us, into believing that we are closer to them, the uber wealthy, than we are to our poor neighbors who live down the street from us. And they've made it seem that the people here that need SNAP are cheating the system. They're lazy. They're not working hard. There's fraud and abuse in the system. The poor, all the while that they, the uber wealthy, are doing all of the right things for all of the right reasons. There could be no form of abuse. There could be no form of fraud among what they're doing. They amass their billions by really good quality moral adventures. I believe in this statement that James Tallarico, who's a representative from Texas, a Democratic representative from Texas, he's said this a couple of times in a couple of speeches he's gone to. I'm going to paraphrase it a little bit, but I believe in this wholeheartedly. He said, "We're focused on the wrong 1%. Trans people are 1% of the population. Muslims are 1% of the population. Undocumented people are 1% of the population. The only minority destroying America is the billionaires and their puppet politicians. The only minority, the only 1% that is destroying America is the billionaires and their puppet politicians." So, if you haven't noticed, Trump is in his real let them eat cake era. I'm sure that Marie Antoinette would be extremely proud of Donald Trump. And if you don't know that reference, I would recommend you go look it up. But what do I mean by that? Trump is in his quote, let them eat cake era. Well, I mean, just the other day on Halloween night, as Americans, tens of millions of Americans are wondering if their SNAP benefits are going to be removed, if they'll be funded for the month, or are they going to have to find another way to try to make ends meet, with all kinds of anxiety and stress about can they even put food on their table. What does Donald Trump do? On your tax dime, he flies to, you guessed it, Mar-a-Lago. And not only does he fly to Mar-a-Lago, but he throws the most tone deaf party you can imagine. A Great Gatsby themed gala at Mar-a-Lago, where the uber wealthy come for this opulence and these incredible plates of food that probably cost them tens of thousands of dollars to even be there, with dancers all around and lights and all of these theatrics of this Great Gatsby theme. He's having this party completely disconnected from the reality that millions of Americans, tens of millions of Americans, are struggling to put food on their table. And what is he doing? He's having a Great Gatsby party. Let them eat cake. We wonder right now why maybe you've seen this before. I'll put the image up here on the screen. Why the famous From the Depths painting by William Balfour Kerr is making the rounds again. Well, if you look at the image here, the depiction of the rich dancing on the floor being held up on the backs of the poor seems pretty apropos at this moment. Why? Because Trump is fully in his bag on let them eat cake. Meanwhile, he's doing all of these awful White House renovations, spending millions of dollars in renovating bathrooms and gilding the Oval Office. I don't know if you've seen it recently, but it looked awful. Tearing down the East Wing. I mean, first he told us that it wasn't going to even touch the existing White House. And then he said, well, just a little bit of the facade needs to come off. And the next thing we know, the entire East Wing is completely demolished and wiped out. How about this? Ballroom plans. Why is the East Wing knocked out? Because supposedly there was going to be a $200 million, $250 million, $300 million, $350 million ballroom being built in Trump's honor, so that he can bring in all of his wealthy friends and wealthy, people from around the world, diplomats from around the world, and wine and dine them at the White House. But the White House is not the president's house. The White House is the people's house. So where does the president get off spending all of this money to renovate our house as if it's his house? We can go on putting up flagpoles, paving the Rose Garden to make it look like this nasty Mar-a-Lago patio deal, buying private jets for Kristi Noem. How about overhauling a $400 million jet given to him by the Qatari government? For what reason, you ask? Could it possibly be because they want a favor as well? Could it be quid pro quo? I don't know. But here's the deal. And I can name a bunch more. You could probably name a bunch more off the top of your head, right? There's all of this money that's being spent. I mean, we're not even talking about like all of the golf trips that they estimate cost about $30 million up to date that Trump has taken. Personal golf trips has cost us, the American people, taxpayers, $30 million. We're not talking about the tax dollars that he's spending to just send troops to cities just because he feels like, well, these blue cities, these Democrat-run cities are on fire, and so we're going to send the National Guard in. We're not talking about how much money they allocated to ICE to make ICE basically the sixth military installation of our nation without any sort of approvals, without any sort of like, ability for oversight. It seems as if nobody's overseeing what's happening with ICE. That's another episode. I need to get an ICE episode out. I know that. But here's the thing. All of these things he's been doing, Trump has always been about Trump and Trump only. That's what we mean when we say he's in his let them eat cake era. Is this whole idea of like, but the people, remember he ran on bringing grocery prices down. He said the next day day one, he was going to bring the prices of groceries down. Groceries, it's a beautiful word. People barely use it anymore. Could you be any more disconnected from the world to make a claim that nobody uses the word groceries anymore? That it's an old word? And he ran on the fact that he would bring the groceries down. But he's hearing now, hey, the people can't eat. They don't have bread. And what's he saying? Let them eat cake and watch me dance on my Great Gatsby dance floor. Watch me build my ballroom. Watch me gild the Oval Office with all this gold leaf craziness. Trump has always been about Trump and Trump only. He conned people. And again, I'm sorry if this is you. I am not trying to make fun of you. People get conned all the time. But he conned people into believing that he was for the people, that he was a populist, that he believed in the average American. He was fighting for the average American. He even claimed this: White House or Washington forgot you. I never will. Donald Trump said that. Washington forgot you. I never will. Nothing is further from the truth. He is not a populist. He's a plutocrat. He claimed, listen to this, he claimed that he would drain the swamp. He didn't drain the swamp. Instead, he turned the swamp into a gaudy Mar-a-Lago-esque resort where he sees himself as the king. And ultimately, we have to ask ourselves, like, how did we get here? How do we get to this place where the wealthiest nation in the world, and we have food costs that are through the roof, with tens of millions of Americans experiencing food insecurity, where health costs are becoming exceedingly out of reach for the average American? We have a housing epidemic. People can't afford to own a home or even put a home over their heads. How did we get here? Well, we can turn the clock back to the point where this really began to become a problem, and it's called Reaganomics. Remember trickle-down economics? Now, I don't have a lot of time to spend on this point, but I want you to go look it up and see how this has impacted us. But during that era, under Reagan cut taxes for wealthy corporations. significantly cut taxes for wealthy corporations. And the expectation of those tax cuts was that the wealth would be distributed, that the economics or the wealth would trickle down to the employees of the employers, that it would be good for all Americans, because as the tax cuts were given to the people at the top, the corporations, that they would distribute the wealth of those tax cuts among the people. And that is not what happened. Instead, what happened was we had this exponential growth of income inequality, because we prioritize an economic system that exploits people for profit. That's what America is right now. A plutocracy, where we are prioritizing this economic system that exploits people for profit for the wealthiest people in the country. Matthew Desmond, who wrote the book Poverty by America, said this: if you survey the American public, you learn that most of us want less poverty and less inequality, at least in principle. But when you ask us about specific policies to accomplish those ends, we begin to equivocate, especially if we feel those policies could cost our families somehow. And this has been the great grift of the Republican Party, is that they have gotten the average American home to believe that it is the people who are impoverished that are holding us back, and that any policies that would help provide health care, that would help provide food benefits, that would help provide housing, would mean that I would have to lose something, that socialism was going to take over. Listen, we live in a socialist economy. It's a socialist economy for all of the elite companies. It's a capitalist society for you and me, but it's a socialist economy for them. They get bailed out constantly. They get tax breaks constantly. And what happens to us? We get footed with the bill. So when you ask about specific policies to accomplish those ends of this less poverty and less inequality in income, most people would agree that it needs to happen. But when you ask them, like, how do we accomplish those ends? That's where it starts to get sticky, because we're afraid that these policies might cost our families something. And that brings us to those families. Like, what families are we talking about? Well, we're talking essentially about the working poor. 28% of SNAP recipients, 28% of SNAP recipients have income earnings. So we already did the math earlier. About 30% of SNAP recipients are children. About 20% of SNAP recipients are adults over the age of 60, so elderly. About 10% of SNAP recipients are disabled people. So that's 70% right there of SNAP recipients. And then 28% of the remaining folks are people who have an earning. These are not people who are lazy. These are not people who are taking advantage of the system. These are people in which the system has taken advantage of them. Some of these folks are forced to work multiple jobs and rely on this gig economy to try to make ends meet. And when they get to the end of the month, the ends still don't meet. Why? Because we've got major corporations. I'll name a couple, but there's more than just these two I'm going to name. We have major corporations like Walmart and Amazon who take huge tax cuts, which is what the big beautiful bill was, and why they want to expire the ACA tax credit so that they could pay for the tax breaks for these big corporations. They get huge tax cuts and refuse to pay their employees a living wage. Now, remember, I opened with a quote from this Australian business billionaire who said, we need to see pain in the economy. We need to remind people that they work for the employer, not the other way around. He goes on to say in that talk that he was giving that the employee has become arrogant since the COVID era, and they need to be reminded, they need to be humbled, they need to be reminded how much they need the employer. right? Because these major corporations take these major tax credits and they refuse to pay their employees a living wage. Listen, the working poor is the working poor because if we look across the board at the United States of America, the federal minimum wage still is $7.25 an hour. Well, that can barely buy you a grande latte. And that minimum wage was increased to $7.25 an hour in 2009. It hasn't moved since 2009. Since that time, the cost of living has grown exponentially. The cost of living has grown so much that the real value of the minimum wage now has declined by nearly 30% since 2009. Because minimum wage did not grow with the cost of living, there is a gap there. And that gap there is that minimum wage, the real value of that minimum wage now is 30% less than it used to be in 2009. Why do we have an entire class of people that are the working poor that need to rely on things like SNAP benefits? Is it because they're lazy? No. Is it because they're taking advantage of the system? No. Is it because these greedy, wealthy corporations refuse to pay a living wage? Yes. Is it because these corporations exploit the labor of their employees? Yes, yes, yes. These practices leave the working poor with nothing more to eat. And that's when we come to where Jean-Jacques Rousseau, the philosopher, said, when the people shall have nothing more to eat, they will eat the rich. And maybe you've seen that because it's made its way back into pop culture. It's made its way back into the nomenclature of modern day America. Eat the rich. It showed up again, I think it was like 2001, where it really began to like start being used again or said again. This idea of eat the rich. We aren't out of money. The government just keeps giving it to the rich via tax breaks and loopholes. Eat the rich isn't a threat. It's a mirror showing what happens when greed replaces empathy and when hunger becomes the policy. Why? When the people shall have nothing more to eat, they will eat the rich. They will turn against their employers. Food, housing, healthcare, they're not luxuries. They're basic human rights. And when the rich refuse to distribute what has been earned by the people on their backs with their labor, what do we have? We have a plutocracy. And until we act like it, this plutocracy will keep feasting while the working poor are told to tighten their belts. But I think it's time that we snap plutocracy. Don't pause SNAP benefits. Let's call out the uber wealthy and the rich and snap plutocracy. Why? Because we're not out of money. We're out of mercy. Let me know what you think about that. Leave a comment below. If you get a chance, share this with someone you know. Again, leave a like, of course. Love to hear your thoughts on this. I don't know about you, but I am tired of seeing a government that it no longer works for or represents the average American person. It's time that we make a stand, that we stand up against these uber wealthy and we get them out of our governments and have this government be ruled once again for the people and by the people. We'll see you next week.